Hello, everybody. My name is Fernando. I'm the host of the Leaps of Insight podcast. This show is about the path for growth. It's for people who are looking for their true selves. We are here to support you and also to challenge you with new perspectives and new ways of being in the world. Enjoy. Welcome, everybody, to the first episode of the Leaps of Insight podcast. Our guest, we have the honor to have Chris Williamson. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Fernando.
How are you?
Very glad to be here. Yeah. Very glad to be the first person on your show.
Welcome. Thank you very much for being here and accepting our invitation. Let's get started. Tell us, what do you do for a living? What gets you out of bed every morning?
I guess I'm a podcaster, technically by trade, which is, I can't really believe is a job. Whatever version of the simulation that we live in, it's pretty cool that I can do that. So I do a podcast called Modern Wisdom. I speak to philosophers and psychologists and scientists and porn stars and athletes and coaches. And we've done about 500 episodes over the last 4 years. And I was born to do that out of a back end of my 20s, loss of sense of I knew what was going on. I didn't know who I was or what I was doing, and I wanted to find a route to be able to give me some answers to that. And I figured that if I got to speak to these really smart people like Jordan Peterson or Robert Greene or Ryan Holiday or James Clear, maybe they would have some answers. Because I can read the book, but part of me maybe was lazy, and another part of me kind of wanted to get the answers from the horse's mouth. And that led me to starting the show. And 500 episodes later, here I am in Guatemala.
For people who don't know your story, I mean, I could say that it's very counterintuitive, the path you took from being a child playing cricket in Newcastle to being a podcaster who gets all these luminaries to answer his questions. How did that happen? What was going on there?
Yeah, so very normal working class upbringing in the northeast of England. It's the final city before Scotland. It's very cold and dark and grey. And I really struggled to fit in at school. Different accents, different interests, only child, so wasn't super socialized, kind of sort of socially autistic, if not fully autistic. And then got to university, started running nightlife events, getting people into clubs, and very quickly found a sense of belonging and purpose doing that because it was successful and it made people need me as well. So I started to feel like I'd found something that was my calling because it gave me a reason for other people to want me or need me, be around me. And that lasted for a good while, and I had a lot of fun doing it, and we ran some amazing events. I still am a director of that same company in the UK. But after a little while, I sort of realized that there was something missing, and that kind of led me to that borderline existential crisis that I spoke about. I did some reality TV, and one of those was Love Island, a big show in the UK. And having done that, coming off the back of it, I kind of thought, is this really all that I have to offer the world? Getting people drunk in nightclubs and going on reality TV and wearing a small pair of swimming shorts and like flirting with girls and stuff. Not to say that that isn't nothing. Like there's a huge market there for it, right? I probably never reached as many people as I did when I did that show, at least not yet. But I always thought that it felt like there was something missing and something more. And again, like I say, I thought some people have got the answers. I was listening to your Joe Rogans, your Sam Harris, your Jordan Peterson, your Alain de Botton, and your Ben Shapiro's, and they really resonated with me. They helped me to see answers to questions that I didn't even know I was asking. And again, that just pushed me toward the closer I can get to those people, the better, the more answers I can have from them. So that started the show.
Would you describe that force that was attracting you to them? Because it doesn't seem like a natural leap from club promoter and reality TV person, celebrity, or something of this nature towards something that is more like the podcaster host of Modern Wisdom, which implies that you're seeking something, you're seeking wisdom. You're a young person looking for for these very hard, complicated things, but also with your own style?
I think it was curiosity. So it's strange in the UK. I don't know how it is in Guatemala, but curiosity hasn't been applauded or reinforced as a personality trait very much at all. You know, there's that adage, children should be seen and not heard. Or there would be a term in the UK called gobshite, which is somebody that talks too much. And you would easily use this to accuse a child that was a little bit too talkative, that they should quiet down. And I think the fact that it seems like a non-logical progression to go from nightlife club promoter, reality TV person to intellectual interviewer or whatever is more a comment on the fact that I wasn't doing what I should have done originally, as opposed to this is some sort of detour. Like, this isn't malignant or some sort of aberration about the way that I'm supposed to live. This was always there. What I'd managed to do was become a professional party boy and kind of tamp that down. There aren't many opportunities on the front door of a nightclub to ask someone about what they think the solution to the Fermi paradox is, or whether thoughts are things, or whether math is actually a real, genuine form of logic, or whether we invent it. Like, you don't. It's get them into the nightclub. They're here to get drunk. So for a long time, I hadn't indulged that side of me, and then I finally got to release it with the podcast.
Excellent. And what do you think was firing all that curiosity? What was behind that?
Oh man, I don't know. It's like genetic. It's just something that's in me. There's a few things that people have that come from somewhere that they don't know. And for me, one of those is the desire to ask questions. I think Naval talks about this, that there are fewer greater joys than linking together two previously not realized stories or concepts, and then you realize that they align. I learned about the game theory of slut shaming not long ago. I read a book, Jeffrey Miller's Mate, that he wrote with Tucker Max, and he explains the fact that what slut shaming does is it is a price enforcement mechanism from women onto other women to ensure that the price of sex doesn't go so low that basically zero commitment is required. And I read that, and like the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, because I was like, that is so cool. That's so interesting. And I just live for that. Live for those insights. I mean, you're the same. Right. You know, you love finding this sort of stuff out. And then you have a vehicle that legitimates you being able to ask the person. So Jeffrey comes on my podcast, and I get to ask him. Like, it's the most wild, bizarre, amazing concatenation of alternative media recipes that you could come up with that allows this to be called a job somehow.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and it keeps you looking for more, right? It never gets satisfied.
Yes.
What you have just described is why you are the perfect person to be the first guest on a podcast called Leaps of Insight, because it's an insight that fires you up and gets you moving. I mean, the point here is not to be more insightful; it's to be more insightful, to be more taking more leaps and to moving forward. We believe that people have more potential than they give themselves credit for. Sometimes, you're in a situation and you choose to accept that situation and accommodate yourself to it. And sometimes you do what you did. I mean, you start breaking molds and going towards your objectives. So yeah, congratulations. Thank you very much for that, Chris. What are you trying to achieve with all this? Where are you headed?
That's a good question. So I'd say that I'm a pretty good role model for people that don't have a plan. There's this sort of commonly held wisdom on the internet that you're supposed to know your 6-month, 2-year, 5-year, 10-year, 25-year plan, and everything's supposed to be laid out and stuff like that. And that's never resonated. It's always made me feel guilty and ashamed that I don't have that, but I just don't, right? I'm very, very good at executing on whatever's in front of me right now. And I'm very, very good at having a bunch of small principles and following those. And I think a lot of people are too. I would maybe argue that the majority of people are like that. And you have some outliers that are able to deploy a plan, this huge grand vision, and they get unbelievably outsized results. But I don't think that it's necessarily always advantageous for people that aren't like that to think that they should try and repurpose their planning and layout mentality in that sort of a way. The end goal for this is just to keep on having interesting conversations. It's led me well so far. if you think about a good art gallery or a museum, you don't need to love every single one of the pieces that's in there, or they don't need to be from an artist that you absolutely adore. What you do is you have faith that the museum or the art gallery curator has put together a collection of art that they think is good, and you go in and some stuff confirms what you already knew, some stuff is from people you're familiar with, some stuff's completely fresh that you've never seen before. Maybe not everything is for you, but maybe it adds a little bit in and it gives you some new insight and you leave there in a different sort of way. So for me, it seems like doing that, being that curator and allowing whatever it is, that driving force, that genetic curiosity, to just be like, he seems cool, I'll have a conversation with him. And 99 times out of 100, it ends up being perfect. So I'm just following that. Long term, I don't know, maybe I write a book. There's a couple of book sort of talks in the wings at the moment. There's opportunities to do courses. But I just enjoy the show. Like I like doing my conversations, and overcomplicating that with a plan or trying to retrofit what I'm doing to the way that it should be, it doesn't seem to work for me. So I'm just kind of sticking at what I'm good at for now.
Yeah, all the anti-plan people out there are cheering right now.
Yes, yes. Join the crowd.
Yeah, excellent. And one thing about this is that your podcast is not just interviewing other people. And particularly your YouTube channel changed its name. It was rebranded. It used to be called Modern Wisdom, and you deliberately changed its name to Chris Williamson. Tell us a little bit about that, because you make it the direction you were taking it is to be more personal.
Yes, that's correct. So I felt like there shouldn't really be a time when, from all of the millions of videos which are added every week to YouTube and all of the alternative platforms that people had to land on, that if they were to land on a piece of my content, they should never, ever say, I really like this podcast, who's the host? Those comments used to make me feel sick. And, personal accountability, what does Naval say? He says that you need to put your name behind something. And I did. Like, it's Modern Wisdom with Chris Williamson on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and my name is everywhere, and my website's everywhere. But it didn't say my name on the highest trafficked platform that we had. So I just added that in. And I think that, one good lesson maybe to take away from that is, even if you've committed to a particular path for a while, just altering it a little bit, just deviating slightly, there's no such thing as too late. Like, I changed the channel name at 150,000 subscribers. We're at 380 or something now. So we've only recently got more people who subscribed to my name than to the original channel. But I still think it was the right decision. People are now landing on there. They know who it is. I'm the host. They also know it's Modern Wisdom. So if you make a mistake, especially in the creative industry, I don't think that there probably is such a point. Joe Rogan couldn't change his now to like something else, but you have far more leeway to make changes than you might think.
Yeah, well, and also something that you do there in your podcast is you're not just discussing ideas with other people, but you're talking about life hacks and things like this with your mates or something. Sometimes you have individual episodes.
Yes.
What kind of things do you talk about when you're not interviewing?
All the same stuff. Like maybe a little bit more fast and loose with some of the ideas. You can be a little bit more dangerous with them, but not much. Like, once you've cultivated an audience that understands what you're trying to achieve, you can talk about pretty much anything. Some of the stuff that I'm really, really interested in at the moment are the sexual dynamics in the marketplace. I think that there's some fascinating challenges that we're facing with the rise of modern dating and apps, the decoupling of sex from procreation, reduced norms around marriage, at least in the West, and rising achievements of women, the lowering achievements of men. What does this mean for women who want to find like a high-value man that they feel can support them, and all this sort of stuff. That's a topic that I've got a current fascination with, but that'll change in 6 months' time. It'll be theoretical physics, or it'll be something to do with the way that the Earth's geology's changed over the last 10,000 years, something, right? And again, just following your curiosity and then letting stuff go when you want to, and going, okay, I now have a new obsession for a little while, and you bring people along with you when you do that as well.
Yeah, you mentioned this, and you've also mentioned the game theory of slut shaming and this kind of thing. Let's hold on to that. I want to go into bro science first.
Yes, sir.
you
It's my specialist subject.
You have this subject called bro science.
Yes.
And I've even heard you talk about a little theory there. Can you take us through that whole bro science and the imposter adaptation thing?
Yes. Okay. So, bro science generally is my get out of jail free card when anybody decides to call me out for not talking about something that I don't understand. And well, look, I never said that this was supposed to be some sort of perfectly formed plan. This is just me observing something and then making a decision about it. Imposter adaptation was an interesting concept that I observed within myself. Everyone knows imposter syndrome. You don't feel like you are worthy of the successes. Every time a challenge is placed up against you, you are uncertain whether or not you're going to be able to get past it. Hedonic adaptation is the fact that our happiness seems to reset back to a baseline, whether something good or bad happens to us. So someone becomes disabled, somebody wins the lottery, within 2 years, they both have the same baseline level of happiness, which is both a blessing and a curse. Something bad happens, you know you're going to be okay, but something good happens, you know you're going to be shit again in a little while. So imposter adaptation is this strange blending of the two, where even as you continue to disprove your own imposter syndrome in the real world, over time, you continue to not believe that you're going to be able to do it again in the future. And everyone is familiar with this in some form or another. You have a challenge, you come up against it, you succeed, another challenge comes along, and you somehow manage to find an excuse to make that challenge different to the one that you just succeeded at, so that your imposter syndrome is permitted to still exist. And after a while, I realized that I needed to admit to myself that my imposter adaptation had everything to do with my addiction to feeling like an imposter and nothing to do with my actual capabilities in the real world. Because all of my capabilities seemed to be proving to me over and over again, when I had a challenge, I seemed to do all right with it. And there was a part of me that didn't want to believe that. And it was just putting a name on a very, very perverse type of imposter syndrome that's very resilient at sticking about even as you continue to succeed.
Yeah, and have you suffered it? Have you felt that it's something that was attacking you in your life? And
oh yeah, for sure, man.
Against?
I crippled with imposter syndrome, and it's only really been the last sort of 18 months, I think, where I've been able to get past that, at least in part, and it still arises every so often, but I am getting better. You need a lot of reassurance to believe that you're good at something if you have a particular personality makeup, and I certainly do. And also, when you run a business, the line between what you do and the outcomes that you get are so fluffy and difficult to find. You don't actually feel like you've developed any specific knowledge, right? Any real skills that can make you be this unbelievable operator. But when you go and do something which is a very, very fine domain skill, like podcasting, you go, well, all right, like or powerlifting or being a sportsman or something. It's like, look, I know that I can do this because I have real sort of tangible metrics of success that I've shown in front of me, which is just a higher bar for your imposter syndrome to get over, as opposed to, oh, well, this business, who knows where the success came from? Who knows why it was good or bad?
I would like to suggest that flow is kind of one of the antidotes to imposter syndrome, and also to its adaptive or disadaptive or maladaptive cousin, which would be imposter adaptation. Because flow gets you in a positive mood and helps you transcend to a next level, and doing it repetitively, it kind of solidifies your being competent, being capable, and not thinking about it that much. What do you think about flow?
I think that I am in it far less than I want to be, and I think that almost everybody is in it far less than they should be. It seems to me like we have a world which is almost created, it's designed to not engender flow, as far as I can see. Distractions, always on notifications, an ever-increasing emotionality of what it is that we're up against. And then Stephen Kotler's been on the show. It's a great episode that people can go and listen to. And you speak to him and you realize just how fragile it is as well. You know, you got this peak state, which is potentially one of the most fulfilling experiences that a human can have. And it's so fragile and so easy to be knocked out of and so hard to find. So yeah, I wish that I was in it more. I'm in it when I have a conversation on a podcast, but the vast majority of knowledge work, even my back end stuff, I'm researching for a guest or something like that. But my research will probably have a bunch of different tabs open. And one of those tabs will have an advert that pops up that's something interesting, or a notification will appear. You go, well, I got to kind of keep the notifications on, because what if the guest rearranges or do so? There's always an excuse. There's always a reason that you can leave a door open that is able to knock you out of flow. And this is why going narrow and deep, the paper that you're working on at the moment, is really important, because it gives you something to deploy that flow into. But most people, most of the time, they don't have that.
Yeah, and that's why it's very important to go to basics, to design your environment, to set yourself up. I'm becoming a bit of a digital hermit or something, because I don't have notifications in my phone. I don't, I'm not available when I don't want to be available. But the payoff is really big. The payoff is amazing. And one of the great things about flow is that it can be trained. It's not just something that happens, because precisely what you were saying, it's very fragile. By definition, it's fragile. It's the edge when you are, your capabilities and your skills are right there where the challenge is. So it's at the edge of your comfort zone. And as I think it's David Goggins that says that you usually only perform at 40% of your capacity and then quit. So, it's something that you don't necessarily normally are looking for. But on the other side, it's amazing. So it's something that we can encourage people to do it and to find it and find your zone, because beyond the zone is where your zone of opportunity is, where your not beyond the zone, beyond that edge is where you find your zone.
Yes.
So what I was going to try with you a little bit right now is to see if we can do a little bro science. Do you think about it? Do you think it's okay?
Let's
we can do a few thought experiments?
Yes.
I had a question about all of this that you've done with the dating market.
Yes.
What you've learned in the dating market is very profound. And I think it could be perfectly applied to leaders in the knowledge work arena, because it's about attracting people. It's about getting people to stay with you. To avoid the Great Resignation. A lot of people. The economic conditions are not very good, but they're still quitting their jobs. People don't want to go back to the office now that the pandemic is starting to recede. It seems to me like there's something in this kind of environment where people are trying to be more attractive to others. Like, for example, what you were saying, that you have to make gestures that are not just posturing. They have to be expensive to the one who's making the gesture.
Costly signaling, yes.
Yeah, costly signaling for the workforce, for example.
Correct.
Because it doesn't seem like companies are sacrificing enough, or that bosses are making enough
I think they sacrifice.
Concessions.
It certainly seems like they sacrifice enough monetarily, but everybody knows that the one thing that the company probably has in okay reserves is cash. What they don't see is perhaps the CEO coming downstairs and sitting down and saying, look, I've got an open door for the next 5 hours. Anyone can come and have a conversation with me about what they think's going on. And if nobody comes in, then maybe you've got a different problem. But maybe if a lot of people come in, you have some problems that at least have been identified. So yeah, the costly signaling is different. You can't get a bottle of vodka out or a bottle of champagne and spray it all over the office. No one cares about that. It's like, what's the real signal that you can try and give that's costly to you?
Right. And as you said, if nobody comes, silence is data too, right? You're learning something.
Could
nobody
be a very
wants
good
to
thing.
Be around you.
I probably guess it would be a pretty bad thing, though.
Right. But in the end, it starts signaling to you. If you're the boy that's not getting any dates, they start doing things.
Feedback.
Yeah, you get feedback. How should leaders behave differently if they're getting this kind of feedback, this kind of rejection from people, or people just being nice? All smiley and nice to them when they arrive, but not really. It seems like it's not genuine. It seems like the people are disengaged.
This is the perennial question, right? What is it? 85% of workers at the moment are either unengaged or actively disengaged with the job that they do. Unbelievable. It's 8 hours a day. So first off, you are not in a minority. Secondly, what makes humans tick is an incredibly difficult question to try and find out the solution to. I would be tempted to start with honesty. I think that that's a good policy to just open up with from the very, very beginning. Probably honesty with some privacy, because people in a large group are less likely to open up. But to say, look, guys, I really want to try and make it a change or a positive impact here. Here is an offering from me. Maybe it's an open door policy or something like that, and just allow people to come in without any judgment and say, look, like, what would you do? What would you, if you were me, what would you do? Involve people in the process. We have, when we're releasing new trailers for the club night business, we have a group chat with all of the managers in. It's 15 of the loudest, most brash, biggest drinking guys and girls that are part of our company, right? 500 staff below them, 15 of the biggest sort of party people. So there's a lot of egos in there. And we'll put a new video in, a new trailer for a club night. And so many times there'll be a criticism from one of the guys or girls that says, like, that song's so 2021, no one listens to it anymore, that artist's uncool, I hate that shot, that girl there is, like, no one likes her, she shouldn't be in the video, and blah, blah, blah. When they put criticisms across, almost all of the time, it's without a solution. It's a criticism without a solution. Okay, so you can highlight the fact that there is a problem without offering a solution, but the business is a solutions-based organization. It's not there to identify problems in itself and do nothing about them. The only reason you identify the problem is in order to direct you toward the solution. So what I would do, if you want to try and get more people engaged, actively engaged with the job, is allow them to put ideas forward, allow them to feel like their voice is being heard. It doesn't need to be in a big group. I would actually say probably better to not do it in a big group, because then you have all other signaling problems. They want to say what they think other people want to hear them say. That doesn't help. Sit them down. What would you do? We say when we're releasing a trailer, that song's so 2021, we should... All right, what would you suggest? Someone complains at me that I don't have enough whatever on the show. Women of a subcontinental origin or whatever, right? Whatever group of people they feel is underrepresented. Okay, who would you like me to speak to from the group that you're saying is underrepresented? And it completely disarms, even on the internet, right, which is the most vicious place ever, completely disarms the conversation, because they go, oh, well, actually, I have a really good example. And you get some really cool stuff that comes out of that. Not only have you turned someone that was perhaps a critic or a low-key enemy or a dissident into a collaborator, but you actually got their information. And even if their information was shit, what you do get to see is you can cross off that person's complaint. You got that person over there. You don't know the difference between a well-meaning skeptic or a cynic that has a justified foundation and someone that's just a hater, because they manifest in very, very similar ways, right? It's very difficult to tell them apart on the front end. Sit down for someone with 15 minutes and ask them enough questions, and you'll know. You'll know whether or not this person is coming at it from the perspective of someone that has a really well thought out criticism or someone that just has reactionary dislike. And both of those are very, very important information. You can either discount it or you can use it.
Well, I love that example because it's how you dance with a situation. I mean, it's not like the bosses are telling people what to do, but it's also creating psychological safety on one end so people can complain, and also creating a situation where they know they have to have radical responsibility and be accountable for what they're doing. And then you allow the best solutions to emerge, and if they don't emerge, then you can say, okay, hasn't moved us forward. Then let's keep on working on it.
Precisely.
So it's beautiful. It's complex. It's not like the classic. This is a machine. Let's produce solutions. It has to be a little dance.
Well, it's an old solution, though, right? Like this is the Socratic method.
Right.
You're just applying the Socratic method to a leadership position.
Right. And finding the Aristotelian mean to,
yes, sir.
To find the right point. So yeah, that sounds good. And in the sense, I mean, we could bro science the the way to change the world. So I think it's a very interesting concept to have something like bro science around, because it empowers a person, not necessarily a PhD in the subject matter, and you normally are just a PhD in one very narrow part of a field. To combine, to do these things, to make combinatorial explosions of a lot of the combinations will not work, but when you hit one that does work, it will bring out a lot of value to a lot of people.
Well, think
so
as
it's
well,
an exercise that should be prescribed.
The way that experiments work as well is that you are genuinely curious about the outcome. And that's a real protection. It's a protection for me on the show. Like, I don't care about sounding stupid. Someone asked the other day, some lady used the word polemic, and I didn't know what a polemic was. It's kind of like a aggressive treatise against a person, right? And I didn't know, so I just said, hang on. What does that mean? And by leading with curiosity and by taking the sort of, look, I'm an idiot in most things. Everyone is an idiot in most things. Even Naval, we were talking about earlier on, him and David Deutsch, like, Naval is an investor who happens to also be a philosopher that's now, branching into physics? Like, even he, if I was to ask him about the principles that underline why intermittent fasting is effective or something, or the biology of flow, he's probably a noob at that as well. But if you can concede the fact that that's the case, not be too invested in the outcome of the experiment. Okay, this is bro science. Okay, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm prepared to ask some dumb questions to try and get there. I also have a hypothesis around what it is. Imposter adaptation. Maybe someone's going to come in and say, do you know what it is? It's actually not that. It's this. Brilliant. You've disproven my hypothesis. Fantastic. I'm going to change the name and now claim whatever you've said is what I meant. But it's just, it's a cool way to do things. It gets rid of the ego.
Yeah, and it helps you enact that principle of strong beliefs.
Loosely held as opposed to loose beliefs strongly held.
Yes.
Yes, very important.
Yeah, I think that's something that it has emanated from your adventure into all of this. A lot of principles that you called at the beginning, you called them little principles, but they're really fundamental and they're guiding posts in your life, don't you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. I always wonder how many people are just a couple of principles away from a radically different life. We spoke about this the other day on our road trip to Antigua. It's so bizarre because I think about the things that have changed the direction that I took, and there are a handful of things, and there are a handful of things that you work on for a year, and then they become a part of you, and then you start adding new ones in. But there's so many people out there that are only a few principles away from leading a radically different life. And that is a motivator to me because I think, okay, well, if I can find some of those principles and I can give them to people, and it's literally free. Knowledge is free. Understanding something is free. It's the freest that it's ever going to be. That's pretty cool. That's like alchemy. There was no cost to this. Time. There was cost of time, and you could have been spending that time doing something else. There's no real cost to it. And yet someone has managed to create from nothing an understanding which then generates happiness or value or utility or a better life for them or better life for their family or whatever. It's wild.
Yeah, I think there's no monetary cost. It just needs time, energy, and attention.
Those are pretty expensive, though.
Yeah. And you have to be able to... You have to know where to invest them. How do you choose what you invest your time, energy, and attention on?
I try to be deliberate. I think if there was one lesson that I'd taken from all of the Modern Wisdom episodes put together, 500 episodes put together, it's that you don't need to live your life by default. It can be done by design. And being intentional with the things that you do, that is the first principle. It comes before absolutely everything else as far as I can see. Because if you're blown along by the winds of life, you literally can't end up at a place that you want to be. You will end up at a place not only that you didn't want to be, but that you didn't even mean to get to, which is wild. I think we were talking the other day, it's about that Socrates line, or it might be Epictetus, where he says, if a man doesn't know where he's going, no wind is favorable. There are winds happening in your life. There are suggestions and pushes and opportunities that will come in front of you. And yet, if you don't know how they fit into a grander plan, you have no idea whether or not they're actually advantageous to you. So I have a bunch of principles. I have 5 core values that I live my life on. They may change, but right now they're curiosity, adventure, selfless development, excellence, and self-care. Everything that I do, I try to fit into one of those. And if it fits into one of those, that's probably good enough for me. Now, that might be a cope, right? Because I'm terrible at planning, as we identified earlier on. But it seems to work pretty well so far.
Yeah, it's. I was going to say that at the beginning you said it's no plan, but there is a very clear intention.
Correct.
There's clarity around what your core values are, and when you're not trying to violate them. You're trying to keep within the sphere of being Chris, and becoming something.
Over time, core values grow into something that in retrospect looks an awful lot like a plan, right? I'm always hesitant about the people that say, I'm just so skeptical because it doesn't come naturally to me to have that long-term laid out plan. I wonder how many people are just post-hocking their way through whatever it is that happened, and only in retrospect does it look like there was a single string narrative that tied it together. I often ask people on the show, tell me what the thread is that ties together all of the different things that you do. And it's a really interesting question because some people don't have one, and the people that do, it's usually a really cool answer. But yeah, it's strange to think about how an emergent property of living by values is looking like you have a plan even when you don't have one. And it's useful for those of us that don't plan very well. It's pretty useful.
Yeah, and on the other hand, last time we talked about this. We talked about writing things down. I mean, a plan could be something that you've written down and it organizes your ideas, and that would be the benefit of it. But what you write down doesn't necessarily have to be a plan. It can be just your ideas. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about the experience you have when you write your newsletter, which is fascinating, and I also recommend people to subscribe to. What was it that you were telling me? I mean, that I thought was very insightful.
Yeah, just that if you don't have a place for you to put your ideas in a rigorous, descriptive, thorough, stress-tested way, usually to an audience, even if that audience is your brother or your partner or your dog. If you don't have that, your ideas remain fluffy. They're this sort of cloudy, ephemeral, very difficult to grasp notion of what you mean. And as soon as someone asks you to put that into words, it needs to be concretized. And you realize that you don't know even 1/3 of what you thought that you knew about this idea. Because it's like an emotion, it's like a sense of something. And you go, okay, well, put it into something concrete, into words. And I would say that you could go from thoughts to words spoken, and then from words spoken to words written, is another degree of concretizing something. Because when you speak, you have all of the flourishing and the you know what I mean. You don't get to say that. You don't get those degrees of freedom when you write. So I think that if somebody is looking to gain more insights in their life, having half an hour once a week when you can sit down with a friend who is interested in stuff and verbally articulate, and just put someone's phone on record a private podcast for just you two guys or you two girls or whatever. Just do that. And then over time, you're going to find that the ideas you have, what do you think about the fact that Elon Musk bought Twitter? And then you will have a rigorous, concentrated 30-minute conversation where your ideas are going to be put to the test, and you have to verbalize them, and it will make your thinking so much more clear. Because the line from brain to mouth or brain to pen has been cleared, and over time you'll become better at communicating your thoughts. And that's a superpower. Jordan Peterson said this on the most recent episode that I did with him. He was talking about the fact that getting all of your words in order is a battlefield mentality. You know, I asked him, what's the most dangerous weapon that you could wield? He talks about how, you know, a harmless man is not a good man. That's a weak man. You want a man who's incredibly dangerous but chooses not to use it. And I said, "What? How should someone become dangerous?" And he said, "Words. You need to be able to articulate your ideas. Those are the things that allow you to deploy what is in your head out into the real world. Because what do you really want to be a poorly defined master of your own internal kingdom that nobody else can see? Or do you want to first be able to dominate and collaborate with other people on the things that you have inside of your head? And again, you don't have to dominate, but it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. So you want to develop that.
Yeah, and also, I mean, if you want to dominate or if you want to contribute, being able to express things concretely, coherently, and everything in the internet world. I mean, your friend David Perel is obviously, he teaches about this, but he also has a lot of investment, and he's a good exemplar of this. Like writing well, thinking about how you write, sharpening your ideas with the written word, looking at them. I would presume that you are confronting your ideas in such a way that you're criticizing them so that you're making them ready to go out into the world.
Yeah.
And they become part of your thinking, or
Absolutely.
they are your thinking. Like what we were discussing last time when you're tapping on a cup.
Yes.
You're sometimes feeling the cup, sometimes feeling the pen, sometimes feeling your finger, sometimes nothing. I mean, the ideas, when they're out there, they become part of your extended cognition.
Yes.
So there's something really sublime and a little mysterious, alchemical happening when you write. In our case, when we have to even translate, you have to help. It helps to make sense that what you're saying is not just turns of phrase that work well in your own language. You have to turn them into something that works well towards the world. And so, but I think it's something that our listeners can. We should encourage our listeners to do that, to exercise, to have that practice, so they can become more effective participants in this world.
Yes.
Yeah, so thinking about that, what other practices would you recommend folks to take care of? What has really worked for you?
Morning walk, dude. It is the one non-negotiable that I have. And there was a period for a big chunk of the show where life hacks and sort of optimizing and efficiency and productivity was a real focus. And I'm jealous of your routine and your alarms that go off to tell you what to do, when to do. But I am trying to be a little bit more free-flowing and intuitive at the moment, which again might be a cope for inefficient or easily distracted. But we vacillate between two extremes a lot of the time, right? We go real intense on our diet and our training, and then we go real intense on socializing or work and play or intuition and cognition or strictness and ease, whatever. But a morning walk for me is so good. Listen to Andrew Huberman talk about morning walks. He'll explain it better than I do. But it makes me feel fantastic. I come back from 15 minutes, first thing in the morning, especially being here when the sun is up. I mean, the sunrise here is like 5 in the morning or something at the moment, which is great. No matter what time I get up, the sun's always going to be up. Meditation has been a part of my life for 4 or 5 years now. Shinzen Young has just released a new meditation app, which is really, really, really cool. And I love his process. If anyone likes the sound of this quite prescriptive, optimized, rational approach to some of the things that we've spoken about, if you Google 5 ways to know yourself, it's a free PDF. It'll be the first thing that comes up, and it is the best description of how to do mindfulness meditation that I've ever read. So meditation, journaling, good as well. Just easy gratitude stuff. Gratitude is the fundamental foundation to happiness. That's been a big part of it. Not having coffee for the first 90 minutes of the day, which is a huge, huge hack. No one needs to have it. Salt and lemon in water will do you better, or just a big glass of cold water will also be fine if you don't like the taste. What else would I put in there? Breathwork is a big part of my morning. State app is one of the apps that I use, which is fantastic. It's $2 a month. Really, really easy to use. Does your CO2 tolerance tests and all that stuff in there. That's the morning. Like that, the day can sometimes change. Sometimes I'm in Guatemala waiting to get my passport back from the US Embassy. Other times I'm at home trying to edit 3 podcast episodes in a day or preparing for a guest or whatever. But starting the day like that usually means that the rest of it goes pretty well. That and training. If I do that, if I do my morning routine well and I train and I've slept enough, the day usually looks after itself. It's when those things start to slip that there's a problem.
Is there something particular about your training, your exercise? I mean, strength, high intensity, or is it a pattern?
I changed my training quite a bit over the last few years. I did bodybuilding, like bro lifts, for pretty much all of my 20s, and then there's something called the fitness menopause, which I noticed, again, more bro science, which I noticed in myself and my friends, that a lot of the time, as guys get toward the end of their 20s, they realize that their training methodology doesn't serve them anymore. They used to do bench press and squats and deadlifts, but they get out of breath going up a set of stairs, and they're tired, and they can't touch their toes and stuff. So they go into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or CrossFit or Thai boxing or yoga or Pilates, or they go back and play a sport that they played 15 years ago when they were a kid. And I found myself increasingly being interested in doing that. So I went and did CrossFit, but right now my training is just normal, high-intensity bodybuilding style training, and it resets my mood more before and after a workout than before and after sleep. So I would much sooner, if you said you're feeling anxious about some problem that you've got, you can either go to sleep for 8 hours or you can go to the gym. Like, take me to the gym, because I get more bleed over from the night before until the morning after when I train. So when I go to sleep than when I train. So I would way sooner go and do that.
Right. I have to highlight the fact that your morning routine and your training with a few weights or whatever, and also now that you mentioned sleep, these are all things that are very low cost. I mean, monetarily, they're not things that are expensive, but it's very important because your physiology, taking care of your body, is probably the most important thing you can do when you're trying to take care of your brain and your mental abilities and your mental skills and being sharp and knowing when to how to invest your focus and attention.
We were talking about this on the way in, that stacking the deck, right. How can you stack the deck in your favor? Well, okay, that might be a difficult question. How can you stack the deck against your favor? Well, you can not get enough sleep, not train, not have some sort of mindfulness routine on a morning, constantly be on your phone from the second that you wake up. Like, I can guarantee that that'll probably make for a pretty shitty day.
Yeah, because you will have a bad mood, and then you will blame it on the world, and then you will detach yourself from it and be disengaged and things. I mean, the consequences are pretty natural from that kind of process. So yeah, using inversion, in that case, the mental
Correct.
model of inversion would be a good way to light the fire below you to get you started on that path. Let me see. I think. Let me just take a. Have you had any leaps of insight whilst you've been visiting here in Guatemala?
Oh yeah, I have. I've had a couple actually. One of them was the discussion that we had about the. You mentioned that the Guatemalan government has varying levels of corruption. That. if you end up being kidnapped, then I'm very sorry. That there has been
historically
there has been previous governments that have asked for money and then they've never used it particularly well. It's been used to fund things that it shouldn't have done. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, "Oh God, that must be so terrible to live in a country with a government that takes your money off you and then whittles it away on useless stuff." And I'm like, "Oh, what makes me think that the politicians in my country, in the UK or in the USA, are any better?" And it's easy to kind of see a country which isn't quite as developed financially or politically as the UK or the USA and kind of cast it off as, oh, that's just a byproduct of being unsophisticated. When they get to our level of sophistication, everything will be fine. You go, no. What do you think are the sorts of people who ascend to up the political stratosphere? They're all the same sort of people. They desire power because the people that didn't desire power as much as them, they were outcompeted by the ones that desired power more because they were prepared to go further. It's like mimetic evolution, right? Or personality evolution over time. It selects for the people that are the most ruthless, the most Machiavellian, the most prepared to do the things that other people aren't prepared to do. So that was a huge insight. I was like, oh my God. Like, it really makes me think, why did I have so much faith in my government or the US government being this. I'm very non-conspiratorial by nature, very, very skeptical of conspiracy and believing usually of the mainstream, not the mainstream narrative, but I usually require extraordinary evidence in order to believe that it was a conspiracy, right? Coordination seems to be very difficult to do in secret. These people that are in charge can't coordinate stuff in public. You know that their public efforts suck. What makes you think that they would be able to do? But my point being, that was a really interesting insight. Another one, which is every time that I come to a country where the living standards of villages or outside of the town and stuff are, significantly lower than what I would be used to in the UK or the USA, is just a reminder that almost all of the things that you think that you need to make a happy life, you don't need. Almost all of the things that distract your consciousness, that you obsess over, that you're neurotic about, almost all of them don't matter. Because you can have people who have 100,000th of what you do, and they can still find joy, and perhaps even more joy than you do. So the framing that you place around the present moment, in large part, determines your experience of it. And if you can get away from the comparison status-seeking game, you may be able to get yourself to a place where far fewer resources can give you far more happiness and satisfaction. So those are two big ones since I've been here.
Yeah, and that's something that always, we always have to keep in mind, those of us who are born or who are living right now in privilege, and in this kind of privilege. When we were going to Antigua with Chris, we saw a gentleman carrying firewood on his back with no shoes. He probably doesn't have a gratitude practice, but in the end, those are people who are very tight units, tight family units. They are very solid there. There's a lot of solidarity between them. They have a lot of hope. They're always looking after the next
working
generation.
In nature, they've probably got a pretty good sleep and wake cycle.
Right, and you can't envy their situation, but you have to be aware of that, and also you have to be clear that we were talking about this in the car on the way over here. Probably they live the way our ancestors, and not so far ancestors, lived
100 years ago.
Yeah,
that was what pretty much everyone was like.
Right. So that's something that unites us. So we can look at those people with respect and dignity, and that's something that is very important.
I told you about my friend who, in order to make himself feel better, went to the palliative care unit of hospitals. So palliative care is where the people who are closest to death, right? They're literally guiding them from life into death. People with long-term terminal illnesses or people that are old. And he would go and spend about an hour every month there, going around. I don't know whether he helped out or just sat by people's beds and spoke, which also could be helping out. And he said that he came back with just such a newly reinvigorated love for life and appreciation for what it is that he does. And, driving past people who, they don't have air conditioning, their house is made of corrugated iron on top of wooden boards. You think, and it really does make me feel quite ashamed sometimes of the issues and the criticisms that I have about my life. I'm like, oh, this YouTube episode is taking too long to upload because the internet in my hotel room isn't fast enough. Oh my God. Like, what are you thinking here? And resetting your perspective like that is just, you have to do it. And you have to do it. I think that humor is really, really important, especially in that situation, because otherwise you just despair. You go, I am the least grateful bourgeois wanker, as we would say in the UK, that's ever lived. How dare I have this problem? And yet you have to give yourself the good grace that, well, look, I try to remember this. I'm trying my best to not think about my Wi-Fi speed as the most important part of my day.
Right, yeah, and those are the kinds of things that also, now that you bring humor to the conversation, I think it's very important for people to have humor in their life, to have a good sense of humor, in order also to deal with paradoxes, to deal with things that are dissonant.
And tragedy.
Yeah, tragedy, problems, catastrophes, anything that's on the other side of those difficult situations. If you have a sense of humor, it can pick you up. It can take you. It could take you to a different, to a level that you are comfortable with again. I was thinking, like, for example, now that there's a lot of talk about the polarization of situations in the first world, where there's not even zero-sum games, but sub-zero-sum games where I will lose a little if I can see you lose a lot, that kind of things happening. I mean, if folks just got together and said, look at us, we're just bickering over stupid stuff while there's people having real problems out there. So it could probably be one of those unifying forces that we're looking for in this world. So let's try and keep our senses of humor alive and happening.
You need it, man. I really struggle with that. I take things very seriously. One of the biggest weaknesses that I have is that I pay attention to a lot of things and I spend a lot of time thinking. And when you combine those two, you end up creating big worlds around ideas or experiences or concepts. I really suffered with this when I was a kid, but I've become a little bit more balanced and socialized now. But if you have a little bit of humor, you've got that friend who doesn't take anything seriously. And you don't need to be around them all the time, because they're probably a bad idea to be around them all of the time. But you're around them sometimes, and you'll say something, you'll explain to them this big, elaborate problem that you've got and how it's unique to you, and they don't understand. It's so the weight of it is crushing. And they'll just say some flippant line about yeah, I know, but like, come on, we can have a beer tonight. And you go, do you know what it is? I actually can have a beer tonight. And the level of sort of flippance and humor, it helps to dispel the seriousness of stuff. I'm going to guess a lot of the people that are listening to this may have thought patterns like me and you. They're interested in ideas and being optimal and being efficient and getting the most that they can out of life. You need a couple of friends who are the antithesis of that. Who's the most easygoing, flip-flops and surfboard, doesn't give a shit person that you know? Spend more time around them. I think that's something that I've realized, especially since being in Austin and being around more people who are at more ease like that. I think that's a lesson that I probably could do with heating.
Yeah, somebody who's smarter than you in the sense of presence game. It's somebody who's really there and who doesn't care. But
they're smart enough to know what matters and what doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They're smart enough to be able to let go.
Yeah. I think it's really important. That's something that a guy told me, and it stuck with me a long time ago. Always try to be the dumbest person in the room, so you have more to learn from everybody.
Oh, dude, if you keep doing this podcast and you podcast with some of the people that I have, that's part of your job. Like, my job is literally I've made a profession out of being the dumbest person in a conversation 500 times. There is another side to that, which is kind of interesting, and I've realized since doing the show. You do actually want to be able to display your mastery every so often, and not in the cute way that when your kid tries to play fight with you that's 7 years old and actually pushes you and you slightly fall over, that you go, oh, wow, like, didn't you do well? You don't want that kid gloves mentality. There's a few times when you actually want to be able to go and crush and really, really show your capability at a thing. And that's why being the most stupid person in a conversation is a good idea, but then every so often being able to show yourself your mastery is also really, really cool. And I think that's why team sports are so cool, right? Because you're able to do something really, really good. If you're the goalkeeper, no one else is the goalkeeper, or no one else is the whatever role that you have.
Right.
And that's why it's cool.
Yeah. No, each time you increase your level of intelligence, then you're raising the whole room, right?
Like you compute again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very good. That's a great thing. I mean, something that I wanted to ask you was, if you were to teach, you mentioned something about courses. If you were to teach the Chris Williamson system for living, what would that course be about?
It's a good question. I think it would be the principles that I've learned. So first off, the buy-in would have to be, you do not need to live your life by default. It can be lived by design. Like, you have to accept that. That means no more victim mentality. That doesn't mean that you can't feel sorry for yourself, right? Feeling sorry for yourself has its place, but it needs to be, I have control over the outcomes that I get in life. I have way more control over them than I think. And then it would be a series of principles, thinking about, you are not your thoughts, right? You're the one that hears them. It's a really, really important insight for people to know. The fact that you can get far more out of being selfless than being selfish, the fact that it is important for you to start the day with a routine that you can rely on, that you enjoy and that you look forward to. Anxiety cost, another thing that I talk about, the fact that the longer that it takes for you to do a thing, the more time you spend thinking about the thing. And all of that time that you spend thinking about it, when you could have just done it, is a cost, an additional cost that you don't need, right? David Allen, Getting Things Done, he says you should never have a thought more than once that you don't want to have, because you should just cast it off into the to-do system, and then when it arises, you deal with it and you don't need to think about it again. It would be a series of insights like that, I think. But the main one being that you can take control of your life. And then when you got to the black belt pro level of it, I would tell you that almost all of the things that you do in life probably don't matter, and that the outcomes that you get are probably going to arise in any case. But you can only get to that level once you've done the first one. So this is Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, right? So system 2, deliberate, effortful. System 1, automatic, happens without thought. You need to go through system 2 to get to system 1. And then when you get to system 1, you realize that a lot of the tools that you picked up to allow you to bring in some of the things that you needed, you now need to get rid of. So for me on a show, right, I like to prepare for the guests that I'm speaking to. I like to read the book and listen to them and do whatever and write the questions out and have a little bit of a format. Not a full format, but like a little bit of a one. And now that's become a little bit more of a crux, because I have the skills to be able to carry the conversation in full flow, but I'm still using the tools from when I was starting out. So there's levels and levels and levels to the insights, right? Each leap that you take presents you with a new opportunity and a new challenge, and you need to accept the fact that maybe some of the things that got you here won't get you there. Maybe you need to change the name of the YouTube channel. Maybe you need to prepare less for a guest instead of more. As you accumulate more and more skills, the way that you deploy them needs to be done in a progressively different way. And you need to reassess, look, is this serving me anymore? Do I need this anymore? Maybe you and your wife had a set routine that you were going to have date night twice a week, and it was always going to be on a Wednesday and a Saturday, and that would keep you accountable. But after 3 years of doing it, you go, well, we know that we're going to do date night twice a week. Maybe we can actually play around with, maybe we can be a bit more free flow. Maybe we go away for a weekend. Maybe we do Saturday and Sunday. Or maybe we get a babysitter in and we go away once on the, whatever, right? My point is that as you begin to become more experienced with the things that you do, you have fresh challenges, and you need the humility to be able to let go of things that previously got you here. And that's one of the main challenges that I'm dealing with at the moment. So the first half would be learning, and the second half would be unlearning.
Yes, that's what they say. I mean, a person who knows something and who's an expert has the hardest time accepting that they have to let it go. But what you're describing right there is double loop learning. The single loop is working, but then you have to evaluate if the loop is working still, and then you change it and improve it. And that's life. I mean, that's complex and that's adaptive. That's living. So thank you very much, Chris. I mean, this has been a fantastic interview. It's my first time, and you got me into flow. So I've been feeling in a great state. And I just want to ask you for how can people who are listening to this podcast find more of your stuff? I mean, I would have to recommend the Jordan Peterson interview that happened recently in was it April 2022?
February, yeah. So February. I can send you the link, and you can put that in the show notes below. So if people like what they've heard today, there's a great Jordan Peterson episode, which is maybe a good introduction. Chris Williamson on YouTube, Modern Wisdom on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you listen. And then if you want to sign up to the mailing list, I have a free reading list of 100 books that were the most interesting ones that I've read. And that's chriswillx.com/books. Totally free. Man, I appreciate it. You're for all that you said that it was your first time. You've settled into it like a natural, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with the show.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank my great sponsor. It's the Recording Box. We are recording here, and actually the holding of the Recording Box is Ikigai, and we are actually moving towards our Ikigai in this conversation. So thank you very much.